It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Thursday, May the 9th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams. He's produced the program. Let's get it going. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 86. 26. So another big win for Canada and Liam Hickey at the World Para Hockey Championships. Beat Czechia 5-1 a couple of days ago. Hickey with another strong game, goal and assist, so playing great. The Canadians look great. And of course, the Czechs were the last bronze medal winner. Of course, as you've heard me mention, it all comes down to the States and Canada probably in the gold medal game. And they got China tomorrow. So let's move down to local sports here for a second. So the Newfoundland Rogues apparently have a press conference coming up at some point later today. They're down 0-2 against the KW Titans. Tomorrow must win at Mary Brown Centre. So I wonder what the presser will include. Maybe it's that last-minute encouragement for people to get down and cheer on the team because it's a winner-go-home type of scenario. And then I heard a story from the CEO at St. John Sports and Entertainment. So, of course, trying to bring more event nights and more activity to the Mary Brown Centre and the Convention Centre itself. But I'm still, people talk about they're still encouraged that there might be hockey as one of the anchor franchises at Mary Brown Centre. I don't know. I mean, it hasn't worked. And unfortunately, in years ago, when there was strong attendance, there was a ton of freebies kicking around out there in the community. So I'd like to see hockey back down there. Junior hockey thrives in markets of this size around Atlantic Canada. I love the Fog Devils. I mean, maybe because I covered them for Rogers TV. I saw every single home game. But you wonder when and if anybody's going to take that flyer. I hope so, but we'll see. What I don't quite understand is the City of St. John's hesitancy or unwillingness to see what the market looks like if someone wants to come in as a private operator to take on Mary Brown Centre. The subsidy in the most recent budget is $7 million. So, of course, you need facilities like that in a city the size of St. John's as the capital city in a province in Canada. But what's the hesitancy? Because they say, we need that we need people to attract more events, maybe have a hockey team or a basketball team or whatever. But a private operator, why wouldn't they make every effort to bring the Grand Slam of curling, the Briar, trade shows, whatever it is, to Mary Brown Centre? So even if they talk about the fact, well, what happens if the private sector goes sideways and they no longer can afford to operate? Well, can't we have just, contractual obligations? If the private operator goes away, then ownership and management reverts back to the City of St. John's. Couldn't we have members of council, one or two, including maybe members of the current St. John's Sports and Entertainment Board, sitting on the board of this potential new private operator? I'm just so unsure. And I mean, inside a budget in excess of $300 million in the capital city, $7 million is not huge, but it's substantial enough when people are looking at their property tax bills going up some 13% this year. So anyway, you want to talk about it? We can do it. And in the world of sports, man, I so desperately want to watch the Oilers and Canucks like I did last night, but it's just too late. It really is, but that's some series going on there. All right, into matters of more importance, I suppose. This story is confounding, on top of being really quite sad. So we were told on April 24th that a truck driver from this province was captured on camera walking away from his truck in the Natacama range. And you know the story now of Brian Lush. So there's a bunch of questions being asked. I have no earthly idea what went on, what led to Mr. Lush's death. And people are, getting in there and playing private sleuth. And yes, there's questions to be asked of the OPP. Of course there is. When they reported that they had found Mr. Lush's body, no foul play was suspected, but they didn't even go on to say exactly where the body was found until we figured out that his body was found in the back of his trailer upon return to this province in Port aux Basques. So, okay, we'll ask the questions. The OPP have been hesitant to answer any real firm questions about how come we didn't know and what was the process inside this investigation where the trailer was not searched adequately to find Mr. Lush. I have no idea, okay? I just don't know. But here's the big problem here. It's for Mr. Lush's family and friends. So we can talk about the competence or the thoroughness of the investigation, but from April 24th up until his death was announced by the OPP, all those days of anguish and worry and grief and sadness and frustration, that's the biggest part of the story to me. So, yeah, we can talk about what the police did or did not do, but to just try to put ourselves in the shoes of the family members, the children, wondering all day, every day, where is Dad? What happened to my father? And then when the story breaks like this, so of course, extremely sad and confusing and confounding all at the same time. But boy, oh boy, what went down there? I have no idea. Okay. So I read a story this morning, it's Mental Health Awareness Week, and this was about first responders and the stigma associated with their PTSD. This one fella who was with the fire department for some 30 years is now a deputy chief at another fire hall, which is a volunteer fire hall. And, one of the lines jumps out because it's a line been used repeatedly over the decades of big boys don't cry, right? We all have a bad habit of putting up that shield, that armor, not willing or wanting to display any emotions. You need to be that so-called macho alpha male. But the problem then becomes it gets bottled up and eventually boils over. We talked about men dying by suicide a couple of days ago, and it's over twice the rate of women dying by suicide. So just put it back out there because there's going to be inevitably men or boys listening to this program this morning that know in their quiet moments that they do need some help and they do need to talk to somebody, but just don't want to be that guy. Do want to be labeled as that guy who's so fragile that he wants to, he needs help. Don't let those voices overtake what is the reality of if you need help, go get help. So those stories, your personal stories really do add to the reduction in stigma. We know that there's all sorts of concerns with access to treatment and long-term care, the continuity of care. But I think it's to our best interest collectively if we continue to tell the stories, okay. And yesterday, apparently, a big thanks to Linda Swain for sitting in for me as I made my way to Gander to celebrate my youngest's birthday on Tuesday. Anyway, so apparently there was plenty of conversations regarding access to care and the number of youth in this province and across the country dealing with addictions. Really quite sad. And yes, please, if we have to talk about it, we should talk about it. I welcome your call. But an interesting email from a listener to the show yesterday saying it's one thing for us to talk about access to treatment, and of course that's critically important. But this person, I think quite wisely, said, what has not been included is some of the cautionary tales that could be part of these conversations. Good point. And didn't really elaborate on what they mean, but here's what I thought they were getting at. It's not only the access conversation, it's some of the warning signs. Because before you know it, what might have been some weekend partying can turn into an absolutely monumental addiction. And we know how it means, what it looks like insofar as the death spiral of addiction. And the numbers in this province are growing year over year. So the good point, it's the cautionary tale. What signs do you wish you had your time back to see? And also went on to make vague reference to, but we can tell a lot about our children and what they're up to and some of the risks associated with their socializing with whoever about who their buddies are. I do know of a family who had a 15-year-old that was really in the throes of addiction. And what they said quite clearly was, we wondered why he wasn't hanging around with the guys that he grew up with in school and the guys in the neighborhood. And all of a sudden, he quit playing hockey. And all of a sudden, his buddies of years gone by were no longer there. And he had a new batch of friends that the parents didn't really know. And eventually found out that that's exactly why the group of friends changed, is because of drugs. So people might not want to air their dirty laundry and or their stories of sadness or addiction, but I do think it can help because there's no textbook to parenting. Parenting is hard. It's rewarding, no doubt, but it's also quite difficult, especially if you're dealing with some of these societal ills. So if you'd like to bring it forward, let's do it. Sticking with children. I know there's many people out there listening that think that it's no need for government to get involved in helping cover your family-related bills, in particular daycare. The problem then becomes, I don't have children that need daycare, so I have no skin in this game, so to speak. But when you read stories about people who have to make decisions about either going back to work or staying home because they cannot find a daycare space, that impacts us all. It really truly does. On top of the merits of early childhood education, if you have one parent or another, and generally speaking, that's probably the mother, is going to stay home, not go back to work because they can't find a spot. So the government has a child care demand portal survey out there. And so here's some of the numbers. Data obtained through access to information requests show that at least 1,783 out of 2,621 respondents, 68% to the survey, have attempted to find childcare and at the time of the survey had not secured a spot. More than 800 of those respondents are on more than 5 waitlists. 181 respondents are on at least 21 lists. So when we think about it, step back and give it an overview. If people aren't going back to work, consequently, it becomes harder to get back into the workforce. They lose their spot in seniority and or their position at their private sector firm. And it's the loss of that expanded tax base and their ability to spend outside of daycare, for instance. So it's probably really good. The research is quite clear on this front. So the province will talk about 9,100 spaces have been created and working towards another 2,100 or 2,200 more spaces are in development. But we've lost spaces at the same time. I'll add to it. And if you're a family in this situation, bring forward your concerns. When you had a child in daycare, they went to the 2-year-old room, the 3-year-old room, the 4-year-old room, and on it goes. And it used to be that if you were a faithful consumer or customer or client of a daycare, then they would save your space in grade 4, the 4-year-old room, when you left the 3-year-old room. But based on government regulations, the daycare operators apparently, and I'm told, are obliged to fill every single space. So you might have your child in daycare in the 2-year-old room, moved off to the 3-year-old room this year, and then to be told there isn't a space for you next year. They didn't save you a space, even though you've been with them for however many years. So further complicates the problem. Yeah, we want the spaces filled, but when families are lucky enough to find a provider, it'd be nice if they could keep the provider and not, we don't have a space for your child after your 2 or 3 years of paying your daycare bill with us. Anyway, let's go. Price of fuel's down across the board, 7 cents-ish in gasoline, and on it goes. Good news. And people, every time we bring up the price of gas, when we talk about the 5 cents, everyone knows about the 5 cents. The 5 cents that is not for the warm idle that come by chance, but is for Silver Peak for the importation and distribution of fuels. And fair enough, you want to take it on. Sticking with that world. When we talk about some of the issues, like when people hear climate change, they immediately think carbon tax. Okay. And we know that the Conservatives are pledging to do away with the tax in full. And talking about alternatives because they acknowledge and say something has to be done. And so they'll talk about innovation technology, notably carbon capture and sequestration. In this province, the government has put forward $6 million over the course of 3 years for research into how viable and the potential economics associated with injecting carbon emissions into depleted oil wells off our shores. They're looking at the same thing off the coast of BC. But the largest carbon capture project in the country has been cancelled. It was a $2.4 billion carbon capture and storage project at the Genesee Generating Station. So at this moment, they're moving away from coal fire to natural gas. And in addition, adding the carbon capture requirement. So they were talking about sequestering up to 3 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions from their power plant. They pledged that it would be at 90%. They've only been able to attain 60%. In addition to them saying that they can't make it economically viable, all the money that came from the government, all the money to add the carbon capture equipment or technology, and it's proven to be ineffective, it's proven to be not economically viable, but it has been the go-to for the oil industry, saying that this can work. At what cost and what efficiency? So just think about it. Regardless of what is employed by the private sector and or the governments, provincially and or federally, at some point, me and you, we're going to pay for this. Maybe not in full, but in part without question. So when Premier Fury, speaking at the Empire Club, said this province could store the entire carbon output of every province and territory of Canada combined for decades. I mean, maybe we can, but at what cost? And how efficient can it be? We've had researchers from Memorial University on this program, but when we look across the carbon capture proposals anywhere in the world, they're coming up short. So it's fine to say you hate the carbon tax, fair ball, who wants to pay more tax than we need to? But if governments, every party in this country says they're going to do something, they all have slightly different plans or diametrically opposed plans, but at what cost And does it work? You want to take it on? Because the largest project in the country, cancelled. All right, go to healthcare for a second. We heard at the CUPE convention, their 50th annual, talking about the creep of privatization. P3s for divided highways, long-term care facilities, penitentiaries, hospitals, up and down the line. So we can take that on. But in one arena of healthcare, and there's already private offerings in healthcare, people do worry about expanding too quickly. But there's a big difference between private blood collection, private diagnostic services, versus things like hip and joint replacements. But one area where I think, we hear the stories about the wait list, the backlog for people waiting for an MRI, and all the grave stories about their symptoms have worsened to the point where they're untreatable and they are incurable. And what that means for the family after all those years of waiting, simply to get a diagnostic procedure. There are private MRI clinics in the country. Is there a model here that can work? Because again, it's vastly different to have a diagnostic test in the private sector than it is to have a surgery. So is there room for that type of operation in the province? Is anybody in the business community looking at it? I believe you can go to Halifax and get a private one. I'm not sure how much it costs, but I'll put that out there for your consideration. And in the world of healthcare. So this is National Nursing Week. And thank you to the great work that nurses do across the country. And we do have a nursing shortage in this province. But mentioned in the proclamation were registered nurses, bravo. Nurse practitioners, absolutely. But the group that was omitted were licensed practical nurses. Right there in the title, they're nurses. And they play a critically important role in the delivery of healthcare in the country. Maybe it was an innocent omission, but boy, oh boy. If you're already talking about strained healthcare professionals, whether they be RNs, nurse practitioners, or LPNs, people don't get into that profession to get a pat on the back. But when you're not included in the proverbial pat on the back or the thank you for your service, bravo for what you do, and we recognize the strain that's on the system and these healthcare pros, and LPN's not part of it, again, maybe just a general oversight, but not good. What do you think? You want to take it on? Let's go. I remember back when they were talking about not having door-to-door delivery for your mail every day. And the community mailboxes were being brought forward, and there was a big upheaval and uproar about them. I've gotten used to mine, and I don't check it all the time. A couple times a week when I think about it. So Canada Post, whose mandate has not changed in decades, they're actually asking the federal government, based on the fact they lost $780 million last year before tax, so $3 billion over the course of the last few years, they say they want to change the mandate. They don't want to be obliged to deliver mail every single day. Look, they're not subsidized by tax dollars, but at some point, we all pay. It's just how things work, right? So I know people might think it's who cares about a 7 or 8 cent rise in the price of a stamp. It's $1.15 to mail a letter in Canada. And they're obliged that if I put a letter in the mail in Vancouver, 3 days later I get it in St. John's. Now we know package delivery has suffered in large part because of the Amazons and the FedExes and the Pure Laters of the world, but the volume of mail going through Canada Post means their mandate should change. So talk about expanding services, which I think makes sense. Communities have lost their postal office. So if there was potential for Canada Post banking and or other financial services, and or they're talking about playing a check-in role on seniors across the country, fair enough, because you might not subsidize it with your tax dollar, but you'll subsidize it out of pocket because we pay more. And the volume of mail has been decreasing dramatically. Letter mail has been declining since 2006. The company delivered 5.5 billion pieces of mail that year. In 2023, 2.2 billion letters. So that number is only going to continue to drop, but if you want to take it on, we can do it. And I was told via email, and someone demanded that I'd say something. Okay, so I don't think we've dropped the topic of onshore or offshore wind. In fact, we've talked about it a fair bit, and so we should. So this person required me to put it back out there for your consideration this morning. Absolutely. The projects are yet to be fully green-lit by the businesses, although the province has said, move all ahead to World Energy GH2. We know their final investment decision is impossible at this moment in time, given the fact the feds are dragging their feet, coming out with a clear definition of what constitutes green and what percentage of tax subsidies they'll be able to avail of. So yes, if you want to talk about amendments to the Electric Accord to allow for offshore wind, you want to talk about the onshore wind proposals, wind to hydrogen and ammonia for export, not for domestic use, the interaction with the provincial grid, anything. Environmental concerns, of course. We can take it on if you're so inclined. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. Beverly wants to kick it off talking about the LPNs. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's begin on line number 1. Beverly, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing great. How about you?
Well, I'm doing good other than this Tom Osborne thing, but I wanted to wish you a happy belated birthday. I saw that it was your birthday recently, and I hope you had a great day.
I did, thank you.
I'm glad. So, I'm a licensed practical nurse, and I was very happy to see that Tom Osborne came out to put a statement out to wish nurses happy Nursing Week. Nursing is an amazing field where people work very hard, but it was so disheartening to see that he left licensed practical nurses out of his statement. Like you said in your preamble, licensed practical nurse is literally in the name. So I wrote Tom Osborne a letter, which I emailed to him yesterday evening. I have not gotten a response from it, but licensed practical nurses are such the backbone of nurses. I'm not trying to downplay the role of registered nurses or nurse practitioners, but licensed practical nurses work in hospitals, they work in clinics, they work in Emerge. Their scope of practice is so large, and to put out a statement wishing everybody happy Nurses Week and leave out licensed practical nurses is just so terrible. To me, it really undermines the unity and solidarity within the nursing profession, and it sends a message to licensed practical nurses that our hard work and dedication is not valued or recognized by the decision makers of our province. I'm calling for Tom Osborne to apologize publicly and to reissue an acknowledgement to licensed practical nurses. Our role, we do direct patient care, medication administration, IV therapy, wound care. There's not much that an LPN does. Not much that an LPN doesn't do. The difference between LPNs and RNs is that RNs care for unstable patients. LPNs care for stable patients. And that's very subjective, in the line of work. But I'm so, like I said, I'm just very disheartened that our elected official didn't have, Tom Osborne knows we exist. We've been lobbying for a very long time for our job to be reevaluated, to see what we do, the magnitude of what we are in healthcare. For I think at least 9 months that our role needed to be or was going to be reviewed by the government for increase in pay. The job of LPNs has changed significantly in previous years, in the last 10 years in Newfoundland, and for Tom Osborne, it really just does not make me feel top shelf.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if this was on purpose or an oversight, but the fact of the matter is we've got a bunch of trained healthcare professionals, and some LPNs might just shrug it off and go back to work today and say, I don't care what Tom Osborne says. But for others, it just adds to their day-to-day stress and whether or not they feel respected in the job place, which we've heard many times from a variety of different healthcare disciplines in the province. And you talk about more work and job description, the scope of practice. We've talked about many healthcare pros expand their scope of practice to do what they're trained to do, what they're accredited to do, but are not allowed based on a bunch of flimsy thresholds that are set forward. Scope of practice for LPNs has increased fairly dramatically over the course of the last 6 years, but their pay hasn't. And I think I can speak for everybody when I say that if I'm asked to do more work, then I'd like to be paid in conjunction with my added responsibilities. So I don't think that's an unnecessary gripe. It makes all the sense in the world to me. Like, if I had to do a second show today, I'd want to get paid more. I think that's just nature of the beast. We're not all in it for simply our health or to be altruistic. People work, yes, to give back, yes, to help, and in your case, yes, to care for people, but we also want to get paid for what we do.
Absolutely. And if it's okay with you, I would like to read out the letter that I wrote to Tom Osborne.
Sure.
So, dear Mr. Osborne, I'm writing to express my deep disappointment regarding the exclusion of licensed practical nurses from the recognition and celebration during Nurses Week in Newfoundland and Labrador. I believe it is essential to acknowledge the invaluable contributions of LPNs in our healthcare system. LPNs are members of the nursing profession playing crucial roles in delivering high-quality care and supporting the health and well-being of individuals across our province. Our dedication, expertise, and compassion care deserve recognition and appreciation, especially during Nursing Week, a time that's set aside to honor and celebrate the nursing profession as a whole. LPNs in Newfoundland and Labrador fulfill diverse responsibilities across various healthcare settings, including hospitals, long-term care facilities, community health centers, and clinics. Their role encompasses direct patient care, collaboration with interdisciplinary teams, education, and advocacy for patients and their families, documentation of medical records, medication administration, IV therapy, wound care, and ongoing professional development. LPNs contribute significantly to the delivery of safe, effective, and patient-centered care, often working tirelessly to meet the healthcare needs of our population. Excluding LPNs from Nursing Week fails to acknowledge their essential contributions to our healthcare system and undermines the unity and solidarity within the nursing profession. It sends a disheartening message to LPNs that their hard work and dedication is not valued or recognized by the decision makers in our province. I urge you to reconsider this exclusion and take proactive steps to ensure that LPNs are appropriately recognized and celebrate during Nursing Week and throughout the year. Recognizing the contributions of all nursing professionals, including LPNs, not only promotes inclusivity and unity within the profession, but also fosters a culture of appreciation and respect for the vital role that each healthcare provider plays in delivering quality care to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. Thank you for considering my concerns, and I trust that you will take the appropriate actions to rectify this oversight and ensure that LPNs receive the recognition and appreciation they deserve.
Fair enough. And, sometimes politicians are afraid, possibly the right word, to go back and to, put the right foot forward and to clear up any confusion and or frustration that people may be having. But in this case, this is an easy one. And sometimes I think politicians overreact to the fear of, retracting statements and or setting the record straight. But this is an easy one. I mean, just come out and say, it was an unbelievable oversight, my fault, my bad. Absolutely, nurse practitioners are great. And so then the story's over. I mean, no one's going to say at the door, Tom Osborne's going around campaigning, I'm not voting for you because of that statement regarding or not including LPNs. Just set the record straight. Let's move on. Let's make sure everybody's recognized for the good work they do. Beverly, I appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for calling. I appreciate the birthday wish too.
Thank you, Patty. I hope you have a great day. Thanks for listening.
The same to you. Take care. Bye-bye. All right, so let's try to stay on task with the breaks here this morning. There is pretty damning letter floating around and documented research looking at the relationship between aquaculture, open pen fish farming in the province, and salmon returns. In particular, we're going to talk about Conn River when we come back and speak with Robert Bishop. He's the president of the Salmonoid Council of Newfoundland and Labrador. Sean wants to talk about emergency rooms. We're going to talk about dialysis. Barb wants to talk about the missing trucker story, which is something else. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's go to line number 2. Sean, you're on the air.
Good morning. How are you, Patty?
Doing okay. How about you?
I'm pretty good. I'm just on a path walking with a friend of mine, and we were chatting about the issue the other morning. you had when a lady called in about the emergency room at St. Clair's, and nobody could help an elder lady who was sitting by herself after being brought in by ambulance, sitting by herself for 12 to 14 hours and hadn't even been given a glass of water or help to the bathroom. You remember that?
Yep.
So we were just talking about it, and first thing came to my mind was a couple of volunteers placed there during the daytimes and evenings like that would be a great asset to the staff. The staff are driven crazy. They're busy, and it's hard to attend to little details. But, you know, a staff person, or maybe a former staff person who's retired, probably a volunteer, or even candy stripers. Remember those? We used to have candy stripers all the time helping out. We really need that again, and especially at the emergency rooms. People are frustrated. They're trying to get in to see someone to get help, and they're not well, or otherwise they wouldn't be there. So this friend of mine was just having some thoughts, too. I'll just give her the phone for a second. Go ahead.
Oh, hi, good morning. No, just in the conversation here now, I just thought, you know, the use of volunteers is probably underutilized at this point in time, at least from my observation, and I have been to places where volunteers would be quite useful. So just thinking about the emergency room situation and my own experience there myself, just a couple of people there who could just offer just the ordinary little comforts of life, probably a drink of water, probably just a blanket, just some word of encouragement to say that they will be taken care of, it, that they'll do okay. So I think it's we're underutilizing people out there who are willing to do that, and it wouldn't be too much of a drain on them, and it wouldn't be too much of a drain on the whole financial situation and staffing and all of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just having to chat about that, and hopefully something can be done, because I think the need is there, and it's time to do some action. Okay,
Curiously,
thank you very much.
No problem at all. You know, I don't know if Sean's taking the phone back, but, you know, the whole role of the candy striper, because I think people will remember the candy stripers in the hospitals, and they were pretty good when it came to additional comfort, whether it just be a word of encouragement or a glass of water or a blanket. Or Sean, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so I had a conversation about this exact topic, and I believe it's as far back as when I was on Nightline, which was quite a long time ago now. And someone told me that in their youth, they were exactly that, a candy striper. And one day, they were told that they were no longer going to be using them in the hospital. And I believe, if I recall this correctly, is that with how society has become so litigious, that there was concerns regarding liability for a volunteer. So if you were just trying to push someone down the hallway in a wheelchair and something happened, and you were dragging along your IV and something happened and got pulled out of your arm, and whether or not you gave someone an ibuprofen and there was some sort of reaction, that was the concern at the time. I'm pretty sure that's what they told me, is they said with malpractice-related matters and a litigious society, that people didn't want to put their volunteers in harm's way regarding any sort of responsibility for treating or dealing with people who were already ill enough to be in that setting. That kind of makes sense to me. But your comments, like for instance, if this is retired nurses or some healthcare pro or just a well-intentioned volunteer, to be able to do a limited number of things, like a blanket, like get them a glass of water, things like that, fair enough. It's probably something that we could incorporate, but you know, I don't know if they can provide a whole lot more beyond that, because absolutely liability concerns are front and center.
Well, I don't think they need to, Patty. And my friend just left. She took the other route from Bowring Park and went on towards her own home. But she said to me, "Tell him I'm a senior."
Okay.
And she worked with the federal government for years. She's retired. She has a husband who's got dementia, or an ex-husband, and she still goes over and visits him and helps him out. You know, I mean, that's pure angel-like. You know, we need those angels or candy stripers in those places where the staff are so wrung out. You know, from a tough day, and they really can't have a smile on their faces the way a volunteer could, because a volunteer wouldn't have the stresses on them. So you're trying to get a person who's a nurse or someone who's a professional there, dealing in a very, very highly emotional, professional state, with everyone coming in with everything happening to them. And then when you have people who are relaxed or they're to volunteer, you kind of take the edge off, and then people are less aggressive trying to get their loved one in to be seen. You know, it just seems to me that we're missing out on that. And you're right, don't bother with all the stuff that can get us in trouble. A glass of water, a blanket, help someone to the bathroom. Like that lady hadn't gone to the bathroom in 12 and 14 hours after all she's been through. So I called the other day. I couldn't stay on, but I wanted to get back to you on it and see what your listeners think. And maybe there's a whole bunch of volunteers out there with background or maybe no background in medical care but retired and would love to go back in. No one wants to see someone stressed out, strained out, in that situation, whether it's staff or whether it's the poor patient who's in there, because nobody wants to go there. But if you have to go, you have to go.
That you do. Sean, appreciate the time. Enjoy your walk.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's keep rolling. Go to line number 4. Say good morning to the President of the Salmonoid Council of Newfoundland and Labrador. That's Robert Bishop. Good morning, Robert. You're on the air.
Good morning. Thank you.
Welcome to the program. So there's a new peer-reviewed paper published in Reviews in Fisheries Science and Aquaculture looking at the decline of salmon population in Conn River. What have they found?
Well, what they found after looking at every other possibility is that the only identifiable reason for the decline, and it's more than a decline, it's a decimation really, of the Conn River salmon population, is the presence of aquaculture in the area.
So they're talking about a 92% decline over the last 4 years, which is a significant number. So I did not have a chance to read the report yet, Robert. I only saw your email this morning when I got to work. But are they talking about things like, phytoplankton and warming water temperatures, those types of things, different types of predatory issues that we've been discussing over the years? Or is the key focus on the presence of aquaculture?
Well, they looked at all the other possibilities.
Okay.
That could be contributing to the decline. But what it came down to is the only thing that actually accounts for all this decline is the presence of the aquaculture industry. And what that industry brings to the areas wherever it's set up is disease, sea lice infestations, and sea lice were also carriers of some of the disease, as well as, there's always... despite what the industry says, there's no such thing as a totally secure open net pen. There are escapes all the time, and that in turn causes what's called genetic introgression when the surviving escapees enter rivers and end up mating with wild salmon. So you get what you get is a hybrid creature. It's like trying to mate a moose and a cow. A domestic dairy cow that doesn't have the survival skills or abilities genetically to survive in the wild. And that is a major problem. And a previous study by one of the authors of this one, in fact, looked at 18 rivers in the area around Bay d'Espoir, which is sort of the epicenter of the aquaculture industry in Newfoundland, and found 17 of the 18, the predominant numbers of fish there were actually hybrids as a result of escapees. And every one of those rivers is also showing declines.
Is there any cold comfort given the inability for the smolt brought in by Grieg and Placentia Bay to interact or create these hybrids in rivers in close proximity? Like, is that any comfort to you folks? Because, if the big concern is on top of mass mortality events and sea lice infestation, the hybrid would, to me, be at least somewhere near the very top of the list. So do you look at the Grieg operations differently, or you still have the same concerns given the potential for escapes, given the potential for sea lice infestation, even if they're talking about lumpfish or anything else? So do you look at Grieg differently than you look at some of the other operations, Robert?
Not at all. Supposedly these smolt that Grieg will be producing and they already are putting in the water, they're treated to supposedly make them sterile, but that process is like 95-96% effective. So that still means a percentage of the fish that are in there are viable, that they can spawn. And so a percentage of the ones that escape will eventually end up going into the rivers and spawning. And if you look at the rivers in Placentia Bay, they're all small rivers with relatively small runs in the high hundreds. Some of them break into four figures, into 1,000 plus. But the vast majority of them are small rivers, and it's not going to take very much to wipe them out as well.
I just used the number 92% over 4 decades decrease in salmon return. Can you give us numbers in addition to percentages? Like we went from 10,000 to X% or X number. Do we have any numbers to break it down a little further?
Well, we have a bit because there were counting fences on the Conn River years ago, back in the 70s and 80s, and the average at that time run was around 7,700 fish, but some years was up in the 10,000. And, I'll be polite here, old fellows like me who were around in those days know what a gem the Conn River was. It was a beautiful, well, it still is beautiful in terms of looking at it and so on, but the population of salmon was fantastic. It was an early run. It was wonderful. Now the average run has been about 300 or less, and an awful lot of those, and again, it's not reflected in this study, but other studies have been done on it. The vast majority of those are actually hybrids or actual escapees. And the river has been closed to angling for many, many years because as a result, and the Conn River Band has the right to take so many fish each year for food and ceremonial purposes and so on, but they've declined to do that because the population was in such poor condition.
It's interesting, if not curious, the west coast of the country, no open pen farming. Why? Because the federal government says so. And here they just sort of shrug their shoulders and treat it vastly differently. I never know why, I don't understand why, but that's kind of neither here nor there, I suppose. Insofar as this peer-reviewed research goes, does it also include looking at other jurisdictions, whether it be in Scandinavia or off the coast of Scotland or anywhere else where the open pen farming is in play and the relationship it has with returning or declining salmon returns?
Well, this particular study was strictly on the Conn. I mean, it doesn't cover out any of the other rivers in Newfoundland or elsewhere in Canada. But I'm sure the work that's been done in other jurisdictions was used as a resource by the people doing the study. But if you look at anywhere where there are open net pen salmon aquaculture sites, and that's Norway, Scotland, Ireland, Bay of Fundy, where these operations are set up, wild Atlantic salmon disappear. It's universal right across the board. I mean, the Norwegians have recognized that for years. And why do you think all these Norwegian companies, which totally dominate the industry, are coming here? It's because they're getting shut down in Norway. Norway issues limited term licenses for aquaculture sites, and as the licenses expire, they're not renewing them for any sites that are anywhere near a salmon river. And they're devoting millions of kroner, their currency, to trying to reestablish runs that have been wiped out as a result of the aquaculture industry.
Well, look no further than Grieg, a Norwegian company coming to our shores. And, there's also a continued problem when it's the concept of the fox watching the hen house. With government so obviously in full-throated support of aquaculture, even financially, as opposed to simply green-lighting proposals, it becomes problematic because the overseer, the regulator, is also a proponent of or a supporter of. It becomes virtually impossible to manage it as effectively or as efficiently as they could or should.
Yeah, and that's true at both levels of government. The Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans is also despite having the prime responsibility for the health and continuation of wild Atlantic salmon populations, they're also in the business of promoting and facilitating aquaculture. Provincial government is absolutely a cheerleader for the industry, and actually had to be forced by legal action by salmon conservation organizations, and I've been involved in that process, to follow its own laws with respect to environmental impact statements and reviews prior to expansion. I mean, they were just going to basically wave this major expansion by Grieg through without any kind of environmental impact review. And it was only because of these court cases that we've been through and won at both at the regular court and at the appeal level that the government was forced to put an environmental review in place for the expansion of the industry. So what we're concerned about now is that the government is actively trying to move this industry further west across the south coast, over towards Port aux Basques, and there are a dozen or more pristine salmon rivers in that area, several of which are big economic contributors to the small local communities with people working at camps and at commercial lodges there. Besides that, the provincial and federal governments and community councils along the way, they're also talking about or promoting creating a marine protected area there, which, it's hypocritical, on their part.
So is there a distance from river or distance or proximity related issue that you think could be viable in this province, or you simply like to see the open pen farming go away in full stop?
Well, that's what I'd like, but realistically, I think we're too far down that road. I think we're ready to back off. But there are certainly locations. If you look at some of these long fjords on the south coast, I might as well use the Norwegian term, these long inlets and so on. There are a number of them with no salmon rivers, and they're narrow enough across the top so that the salmon migrating by are not going to go into them. So there's certainly possibilities, and that's what Norway is doing, is moving the operations. And of course, the difference is that where the salmon rivers are and so on, typically in Norway as here, is where the populations were. So this is where they set up. So there are possibilities here. I mean, what we'd really like to see is the whole thing moved onshore.
Right, and of course the industry will respond quite quickly by saying it's cost prohibitive and the amount of water required, all that. I'm not speaking for them, that's just what they've told us in the past. Very quickly, before I run out of time, Robert, does the Salmon Council have a position on catch and release or hook and release? Because, we look at last year, for instance, it's whether how hard you play the salmon and how long it's out of the water for the photo opportunity, but the warming water in the rivers is really quite something. If ideal temperatures are lost at around 18, and we've had temperatures as high as 27 last year, which means very likely every released salmon, hooked or caught, is going to die. Does the Salmon Council have a position on catch or hook and release?
How long have you got? Yeah, our position is to support catch and release in the right circumstances and right conditions, and we agree with the current environmental protocols that are in place. So you're talking about playing fish over 20 degrees. Well, over 20 degrees, the river should be shut anyway. And anybody with any ethics is not going to be fishing at those kind of high temperatures anyway. It's again, catch and release done properly in the right environmental conditions and with best practices, which doesn't include holding the fish out of water or dragging them up on the beach. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. The provincial government's own study over 4 years found that 96% of fish angled, and they didn't follow the environmental protocols. Sorry about the dog. Okay. The environmental protocols. They were catching fish and so on up in the mid 20s and so on. So even taking that into account, there was 4% mortality. And these were fish that just weren't caught and watched for a day or so. These were fish that were tagged and looked after and followed for months, even into the following year, as long as the tags. And the other thing to remember is these tags were inserted. These fish, besides being caught, angled properly, were operated on, were cut open, and then tag inserted inside them and sewn up again, then released. And you still had a 96% survival rate.
Yeah, I mean, there's tagging programs out there looking at exactly how a fish dies, who the predator was, whether it be warm water and or a seal or any other culprit, which is fascinating stuff. Robert, I have to get going to the break, but I appreciate your time this morning.
Okay, thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Robert Bishop, the president of the Salmonoid Council of NL. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's roll. Let's go to line number one. John, you're on the air.
Yes, hi. Good morning, Paddy. My name is John. I'm a first-time caller to your program, but I'm a frequent listener.
Welcome.
Having a little bit of bad luck yesterday. I got home from work and my suitcase went missing from the back of my truck in the area of Water Street or Patrick Street. Suitcase itself was not no value, but there's personal information inside. It was very important to me and of absolutely no monetary value and no use to anyone else. I'm hoping there's a good Samaritan listening there that might have seen it or seen something and be able to reach out and help us.
I certainly hope so, and I'm not going to ask you what kind of personal information, but if it's important to you, good enough. So you think it bounced out of the back of your truck around Water or Patrick Street?
Yeah, well, no, my tonneau cover is broken, so...
Oh, someone took it?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Well, if it's of no value to them, hopefully they do the right thing. If you want to keep the... very or so-called worthless suitcase, fair enough, but please give back the rest of it. If it's no use to you, just, either drop it here or tell us where it is or put it somewhere where John can go pick it up. But someone knows that someone belonged to them or someone they know has this suitcase. So hopefully someone hears this and allows them to do what we'll call the right thing.
Yes, my name is all over the information that's inside of it. So I don't know if I should leave my number on the air or leave it with you guys, or what do you think?
Yeah, well, John, Dave has your number, so if someone calls us, we'll be happy to connect the two of you. You're welcome to give it out over the air, but I would always suggest probably just leaving with Dave is the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, whatever you think. I know you've had lots of good stories in the past, so hopefully this one turns a good story too.
Yeah, fingers crossed, John. I appreciate the time. If you get it back, give us an update.
Yeah, I will so, Paddy, and thank you very much for your taking the call and having me on the air.
Happy to do it, John. Good luck.
All right, thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, won't sneak anyone on before the news, but Roland, you stay right there to talk about dialysis. Barb wants to talk about the missing trucker story. Boy. And, I think Sean and his walking partner this morning had a great idea. When it comes to the lack of attention that someone might get in a waiting room, and I think especially when we talk about emergency room, because you can be there for hours on end, is it manageable? I would think it is. And you don't have to have any understanding of the healthcare profession or any background in to do some very general duties like, a word of encouragement, checking in on people, whether it be a glass of water or things like that, or assisting someone to get to the washroom. I don't know what the list of duties or responsibilities could look like, but it just makes a lot of sense to me. What I really appreciate, probably most about this show, is when your input and your ideas, provoke further conversation or further thought, whether it be for the listeners and the callers or for those who are actually administering one area of life or another, and in this case, healthcare. Can we bring more volunteers in? Because other than the triage nurse, the only other person you see there, for the most part, is when a nurse comes out to call your name and bring you in behind the curtains, and or a security guard. And the security guard has a pretty obvious role and job description, but adding a volunteer to that layer of healthcare, that makes sense to me. You want to talk about that? Sure, we can do it right after the news. Roland, you stay right there, same as you, Barb. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's go to line number 3. Roland, you're on the air. Hi, Roland. You're on the air.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning to you, sir.
Happy related greetings to you, sir.
Appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Okay. I was calling about Nurses Week, and we hear so much about the poor health care, but no doubt that we do have problems. But I'm calling today about the dialysis unit at Carbonear. And we have 3 sessions daily down there with 9 patients per session. And why I'm calling is what a job the 11 registered nurses and the 2 LPNs they do each day. There's a sign in the unit down there that states Nurses Week, changing lives 1 minute at a time. And how true that is, Paddy. This unit has been in operation for approximately 20 years. And those individuals are so dedicated to each of us residents. The love, the caring, and the respect they display is amazingly outstanding. And when we got that unit, little did I realize that I would become a patient myself. And I mean, we're now getting an expansion to this 6 additional patients per session down there. And the funds have been finalized, and we are now waiting for construction to start. And Paddy, I hope it's the sooner the better, because this expansion is badly needed, and there's no time for delays. And many of our residents that don't have to get to the dialysis in Carbonear now have to travel to St. John's twice and 3 times per week. And I mean, that's very costly. So I was advised about 5 months ago that the funding has been approved, and now we're hoping that this will get on to go. And that's why I was calling Paddy about giving the respect to those people who take care of us people on a daily basis.
Yeah, by and large, I am going to suggest that the vast majority of healthcare professionals have the bedside manner that's required, have the professionalism and the compassion that they bring to work every day. Of course, there's going to be some stressed out healthcare pros, just like there's stressed out professionals in every walk of life. There's also stressed out patients who may indeed be intolerant of the wait time and their frustration, and they're sick and may lash out or may be on the receiving end of some unkind words or some oblivious remarks. But the vast majority of people working in healthcare are top quality. The problem is getting into the system. Once you're in there, it seems like it's pretty good stuff, and people have I can't generalize on this front, but they have positive experiences for the most part.
And that's true, Paddy, and I can understand where you're coming from. Like, when I'm down there, there's 9 other residents. And I mean, the 9 of us, and all of them throughout the day, the 27 per day, we're there because we have no other choice. We have to be there. We can give it up and go home, but we don't last very long after that, Patty. So those people are really keeping us alive on an hourly basis, and I can't express enough how much appreciation I have for them. And like you said, even throughout the healthcare, this last 4 or 5 years I've been involved with healthcare, and I've found nothing but outstanding, and no doubt those people are under a lot of pressure, and I can understand why people in the province get upset on times. But I have to say, what I've encountered, and I really believe that.
And I think you're probably in the majority. As much as we're all frustrated about the workings of healthcare, the people working in the system are, generally speaking, they're top drawer. I appreciate your thoughts and your time this morning, Roland. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, sir, that's fine. Thank you for your time.
Anytime. Thanks for the call.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. Bye-bye. All right, there you go. Let's go to line number 5. Barb, you're on the air.
Hello, Patty.
Hi.
I would like to send a tractor trailer load of bricks to the OPP in Ontario. I can't believe that they were that stupid not to look in the back of Brian's truck. Now, I met Brian when he was with his wife at Daffodil Place.
Okay.
And it's just heartbreaking. That's all I could say.
It is. It's an extremely sad and confusing story. So, I unfortunately gave it a lot of thought yesterday, or maybe that's the wrong word. I thought about it yesterday. A couple of things came to mind immediately. So if you see a truck at a truck stop and the driver goes in for a meal or goes for a walk or whatever to stretch their legs, every single load is locked down. So whether it be the doors on the side or the rear doors, there's always padlocks on them. So if I arrive at a tractor trailer and I'm looking for their driver, I don't know if anyone even thought to notice whether or not there was a padlock missing, because even if Mr. Lush somehow was able to close the door of the trailer and be inside, then of course he would be completely unable to re-establish the padlock. So that might have been a giveaway that there's something amiss here. So I don't know how the investigation proceeded, but obviously since April 24th, while they were just deploying dogs and drones and search teams and helicopters and various search and rescue capabilities, no one thought to look in the back of the truck. I just don't really understand exactly how they did not consider examining the truck in full. And if there was no padlock, to me, that would be straight up giveaway. Because if you go to a truck stop today, every single door is going to have a padlock on it, because there's precious cargo on board, regardless of what they're carrying.
Right.
Yeah, it's a strange story. Really, really something else.
There should be some charges laid against the OPP that was supposed to be looking for Brian, right?
Yeah. And I don't know if it's a natural course of action at Port aux Basques to open up every single truck's trailer to see what's inside, to match it up with the bill. But if that's how they found it, because of Marine Atlantic's requirements or Transport Canada's requirements, it's remarkable that that wasn't considered by the police. And I don't know what happened. For me, the biggest part of this story, Barb, is that for the family and friends, Brian's children, to be waiting since the 24th of May to then have this as the eventual outcome is so friggin' sad. Unbelievable.
I know. Yeah, and for the times that I talked to him at Daffodil Place, they were so happy, even though she was there like me being sick. But they were so happy together,
And I don't know anything about the man, what led to however he died. But my thoughts continually just go all the way back to, the OPP is one part of the conversation, obviously, but it's the family. That's where I struggled with that story, I have to say.
Yes, me too. Thank you. You have a great day.
You too, Barb. All the best.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And, I saw a story coming out of Ontario yesterday regarding the OPP and their involvement in a high-speed police chase going the wrong way on a highway, and eventually there was a collision and someone died. But for the OPP to be unwilling to answer just very fundamental questions about this story, and again, I'm sure they feel that there's a significant amount of egg on their face, but something needs to be done here. I mean, the family needs to be told exactly what went on. If there's apologies or investigations that have to happen here, so be it. But it just can't be, oh, well, we forgot to look in the trailer, and that's the end of the story. It can't really be the end of the story. Let's go to line number 6. Good morning, Ralph Tapper. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. Thanks for taking my call.
Happy to do it. Ralph, are you on council in Torbay?
I'm back on council, yeah.
Good on you.
I took a break from last term, but I'm back. But I'm here wearing a new hat this morning, fairly new anyway, Paddy. I just want to report on and this is a good news story. There's been a group that got together in Torbay and other communities right from Portugal Cove to Logie Bay. We're called the Torbay Folk Arts Council Choral Group. And there is an unbelievable 57 members in this choir. And they all came on board as volunteers. They range from age 35 to 90. We got a lady, Kay Malloy. She's been performing in Torbay all her life, and she's with this group now as well. So, like I say, it's been formed now less than 2 years, and it took off like nothing else. Our Folk Arts Council itself put out a call for anybody interested, but before we knew it, we had 57 members, and there's a waiting list. So this group performs in communities, and we fundraised for the food bank down this way, and Northeast Avalon Food Bank. And we've also raised some monies for various community organizations as well. That goes well over $20,000. So I just wanted to let everybody know we've got a fundraiser scheduled for this Saturday evening in Outer Cove at the Justina Centre. There's a group from this choral group of about 12 members that are going to do a kitchen party. And they include a couple of recognizable names, I'm sure. Ed Cadigan from Logie Bay, Jimmy Martin from Flat Rock. Jimmy will be singing his favorite old Sunday dinner that's on your Sunday morning show just about every week. Yep. So just wanted to throw it out there. There's some tickets left. It's this Saturday evening from 7 to 11 at the Justina Centre. And everybody is welcome to come down and show see these great group of volunteers. And by the way, we're in May on May the 26th. We're going to visit Cape Royal. Their church committee has partnered with us to do a fundraiser in their church as an afternoon concert on May the 26th. So down around the shore, anybody is welcome to that fundraiser as well.
Ralph, good on you. So does the entire choral group perform together all the time, or whenever anyone can make it? I think you mentioned that as 12 of you on the event coming up at the Justina Centre.
Yeah, as like a subgroup from this, and we actually started probably 2 months ago. There was a group of international nurses that had a meeting here in St. John's. And they asked they wanted to see a Newfoundland kitchen party. So one of our members had that connection, and lo and behold, we went down to their hotel. They were delighted because, again, they were from Australia, New Zealand, all around the world, and they were delighted to see this. So this subgroup now is we're going to try to do as many appearances as possible in our own communities and out around where we could make a few bucks for the food bank and our own organization. And by the way, this group is planning a trip to Limerick next year for the Limerick Sings International Choral Festival, which is an annual event. And I believe if we do go, and we're raising money on our own and paying our own way, if we do go, it'll be the first Newfoundland and Labrador group to participate at the festival, and possibly Canada's as well.
I think it sounds great, Ralph. I appreciate your time this morning. Give us the details one more time about when you can see this particular choral group.
Yeah, it's a kitchen party. It's a part of the choral group down at the Justina Centre this Saturday evening, May the 11th, from 7 to 11. There's some tickets left that are available at the door. And this is supported by the town of Logie Bay, Middle Cove, Outer Cove as well. We appreciate their help.
And I appreciate your time, Ralph. Good luck with it. Break a leg.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Paddy.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
That's Ralph Tapper, member of council and promoting the newly formed choral group. Dave, did you say we're going to line 3 when we come back? Okay, let's take a break. Of course, talk about Nursing Week and the omission of recognising the good work of the LPNs. Sherry Hillier, who's the president of QPNL, and also they've had their most recent convention, real keen focus on P3. Sherry's right after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the president at QPNL. That's Sherry Hillier. Good morning, Sherry. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
That's kind. How about you?
Oh, pretty tired after a full week of celebrating 50 years of QP Newfoundland and Labrador and the history of our convention.
We'll get into that because I do want to talk about P3s with you for a moment, but I know you want to talk about Nursing Week first. Go ahead.
Absolutely, Patty. I've just been, since convention, I received hundreds of emails talking about Nursing Week. So first, to every licensed practical nurse out there, from a licensed practical nurse myself for more than 33 years, happy Nursing Week. And to every nursing profession out there, happy Nursing Week on behalf of QP Newfoundland and Labrador and on behalf of myself. I just wanted the licensed practical nurses today, just more touch point on anything, that we are indeed working with government in the role of the licensed practical nurse. From 33 years ago to now, the role has certainly changed. When I graduated, I was a registered nursing assistant. Now today, I am a licensed practical nurse, and that's right, I am a nurse. So to every licensed practical nurse out there, and I know a lot of times we're hearing nurses and LPNs. I always correct anyone when they say that, because every LPN in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador is most definitely a nurse, and you go beyond your scope of practice. I guarantee you that we are constantly in consultation with government, and consultation for me in government is more than 15 minutes. We have actually, with the Registered Nurses Union and another union, have established a professional nursing network, and that's to review all the roles of the licensed practical nurse, the registered nurse practitioners, is a body of nursing groups together. So we are continuing to fight for the licensed practical nurses. And one thing, I know it sounds like I'm going to babble on here, but the role of the licensed practical nurse and the scope, many years ago when I was a working nurse on the floor, government went to Ontario and brought in a model of care. But they brought the model of care back to Newfoundland and Labrador, but they didn't bring it back in its entirety. They kind of stopped at the role of the licensed practical nurse. Like everything, it takes time. But let me assure you that QP continues to work for licensed practical nurses. Just last July, we went across the province, myself and the healthcare coordinator with QP. We visit every site that we represent licensed practical nurses, and we talk to the licensed practical nurses. But the big thing for licensed practical nurses, and I'll say it during Nursing Week, you need to do out your job evaluation. Government, we fought back government on the bargaining table. We've received wage increases late the fall in September. A fairly decent wage increase. Can we do more? Absolutely. Will we try to do more? Absolutely. Because I can guarantee you, QP has your back.
And I imagine you do. It'd be nice for the minister to just, acknowledge that this was an omission. And I would imagine it's fairly innocent, because who wants to insult an entire profession with a political declaration or awareness of National Nursing Week? So I think it'd be just quite wise to say, my bad.
I'm not speaking for the minister, and I will never speak for anyone. No. But from what I read, that is a proclamation that was put forward by the Registered Nurses Union of Newfoundland and Labrador, and the minister has signed it. I'm not 100% sure, but I suggest maybe you reach out to the minister and ask the minister to come on the show, Minister Osborne, to talk about the proclamation.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that. And for the Registered Nurses Union, they represent registered nurses and nurse practitioners. So I guess it just makes sense for them to acknowledge their own members. But if the minister's going to sign off, that I think makes it incumbent on his office to also include LPNs. Not to say that I'm trying to assign blame to one entity or another, but nurses are nurses. And LPN, it's right there in the name. They're licensed practical nurses. So to be included seems to be logical to me. Anyway, hopefully that rectifies itself, because obviously LPNs are disgruntled with being left out of this particular proclamation. Sherry, let's talk about the convention for a second. So, it used to be when a public-private partnership was broached by any political party, there was always a lot of negative backlash. It seems people have just kind of shrugged their shoulders at it now, because P3s are the go-to. We're talking about long-term care facilities, penitentiary, hospitals, and it's just on divided highways. It seems to be the go-to mechanism for government, and not a whole lot of conversation about it. Your organization says it cannot happen, and P3s do not work, and you've said that quite clearly and boldly. Are you looking at specific examples of P3s that have gone awry? Because if we don't have examples, we're just talking about they don't work because we might not have unionized employees. So are you looking at things that are really clear in a failure of P3?
Well, we presented back in 2000 when I think it was 1999, when I actually had to look up the definition of what a P3 was, because when I would go to Ottawa for my national meetings, I couldn't understand what a P3 was, because we didn't have them here in this full entirety back in the 2000s. CUPE had a campaign going, I think, yearly on P3s. And we fought back, because I know the long-term care facility in Corner Brook, we fought back that was going to be built back in mid-2000s as a P3, and then government took it back and made it a public long-term care. But we had the information from across Canada. We only had to look at the province next door to us, Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia built, I think it was 4 schools under P3s. What happened 10 years down the road? Government had to buy back those schools for 3 times of what they were worth, and then they had to do all the fixtures of them. We're too early in the P3 phase that's being built here to see the inefficiencies yet, but we will see the inefficiencies in about 5 to 10 years from now. And then we're going to look at government and say, I told you so. Patty, the history is across Canada that P3s don't work, because once it gets to the upkeep and the maintenance, like any building, when it's new, it's running smoothly. But when the overall upkeep comes and the maintenance and the infrastructure of those buildings, that's when it starts to deteriorate. The new hospital in Corner Brook that's slated to be open up next month in June. Like, the residents of the West Coast should be very upset, because they're going to be leaving closing a hospital with roughly 200 beds to going down to a hospital with less than 140 beds. Granted, it's a brand new hospital with new features, but at the end of the day, it's the beds in that hospital that needs to be accounted for the residents of the West Coast.
I'm really unsure as to why there's fewer beds in the newly constructed hospital. It doesn't necessarily make sense. I don't know if it reflects the actual population decline on the West Coast, but it seems quite odd when we have a system that's stressed and over capacity. Maybe it's regarding staffing issues or staffing levels, I don't know, but it's a good point that you raise there, that there's going to be 60 fewer beds in this facility. Now, with the creation of a pretty significant size of long-term care, because we do know that there's many people occupying a hospital bed today that are not in a long-term care facility because of staffing-related matters. So it's a bit confusing, and it's some of the questions that we have for the Minister.
Well, that's the overall problem, because there's not enough staffing. And I said it at convention, and there is no shortage of workers. There's shortage of wages. The government need to step up and pay the public sector workers of this province a fair and decent wage. Stop spending our tax dollars' money on agency nursing. Just stop it. Bring the money back in-house. Pay our workers, the people that the nursing professions and any other healthcare provider that has left the healthcare system because of the wages and the working conditions and no work-life balance. To the government, to Premier Andrew Furey and his team, come back and give the residents, the public sector workers of Newfoundland and Labrador, a decent working wages, because that's the problem right there. $36 million in agency nursing go a long way for a Newfoundlander or Labradorian healthcare worker to work in our own facility and keep the money here in our province.
Yeah, and that $36 million, that was only over the course of 5 months. So I think we're looking at $70 million annually last year. They say they have a plan for reducing the reliance on travel nurses, but here's where it gets even more complicated. So even the union didn't know this, but I knew it because I asked the minister about it, the concept of a non-compete. And so they signed one. But the problem is now, to have a reduction on the reliance of travel nurses, how quickly can the travel nurses come back into the public fold? Because at this stage, they signed an agreement that said that they could not come back into the public service for 12 months. So for a system and a shortage in that discipline, that seems counterintuitive. I know why they did it, is try to discourage people from leaving the public system. But, I mean, if they're not going to return to our system for 12 months, what's the chance that they actually leave the province? Or possibly the profession, because no one can sit on the sidelines for 12 months. I don't imagine many registered nurses have a stockpile of cash they can rely on for 12 months. I hate generalizing, but I think that's probably fair to say. So is the province going to do away with that? Because if we're going to take travel nurses that left the public back into the fold, then that clause has to go away. It just does. If not, we're going to make a bad situation even worse.
Oh, I agree 100%.
Strange.
That's exactly what's going to happen. But let the government talk about, let's do some education. Fill the classes of the LPN program, the personal care attendant program. Let's do some free education. Get a system in place. Free education. And you owe service back to Newfoundland and Labrador for X amount of years. We've talked to government on all ways that you can probably increase and get people to come back to work in our healthcare system, because we're running a slippery slope. Patty, I can just speak from a personal experience. There's no home care workers to be gotten. My dad is down at St. Clair's Mercy Hospital on the 6th floor, and kudos to the staff on the 6th West of St. Clair's Mercy Hospital, because I can tell you the care that my dad is getting down there is wonderful. I can't say enough. I can't say thank you enough, because he's being cared for. But you know what? My dad's 84, and I think the average age on 6 West right now, just looking around in the quarters, is probably between 70 and 90, because it is all seniors occupying these beds because there's nowhere to put them. Mm-hmm. I couldn't, when he fell, and there's no home care. I've been trying for home care since February. There's no home care workers to be gotten. It's a sad situation. I can go on and on, because the Health Accord seemed to be the wonderful plan according to government and the health, Dr. Pat Parfrey and Sister Elizabeth Davis, and the social determinants of health, and how to keep our seniors in their own homes for so much longer instead of filling up the hospital beds and long-term care beds. But the plan on paper is beautiful. But you have to have workers to make something like that work. Sure. And that we're 3 years into the Health Accord, so we haven't extended any staff. There's no extra staff. We're always on talking about the ratio of staff. I know licensed practical nurses are leaving the profession, just leaving it, because they can't take it, because the work is so hard in long-term care. They haven't had vacation time. You're talking a licensed practical nurse, some of them probably getting 6 weeks holidays a year. In certain institutions in this province, they can only take 2 weeks of vacation during the summer. It's pretty disheartening if you're after working 25, 30 years and only get 2 weeks of holidays for the summer. It's a sad situation that we're taking here in our province, and I don't see the government doing anything, only putting a Band-Aid on everything.
I appreciate the time, Sherry. Thanks for this.
You're welcome. Thank you, Patty, and happy Nursing Week to all the health professionals out there. Happy Nursing Week.
Hear, hear. Bye, Sherry.
Bye.
Sherry Hillier, the president at CUPE. Okay, for reference back to Ralph Tapper's call and performance of that newly formed choral group, and he mentioned that they're going out to Cape Royal. If you want to find out more about the event and or to get a spot to attend, the contact person at Cape Royal is Sharon Mulcahy. You can reach her at 709-691-4780. So that's Sharon Mulcahy, 709-691-4780. Or her email address is sharonmulcahy131@gmail.com. Okay, it's tourism season. When we come back, we're going to talk a little tourism with the Minister responsible for Tourism, Culture, Arts and Recreation. That's Steve Crocker. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Steve Crocker is the Liberal member for Carbonear, Trinity Bay de Verde. He's the Minister of Tourism, Culture, Arts and Recreation, and joins us on line number 4. Minister Crocker, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Welcome to the show.
Great to be on.
So I think Linda reached out to you yesterday to talk about one specific facet of tourism, that's rental cars. We've heard very specific concerns offered by hospitality operators that say they've lost bookings because their potential customers have said, I can't get a rental car, consequently I can't make my way from St. John's to whether it be the Fisher's Loft or otherwise. What's government's role?
Yeah, well, government's role is, it's an important one. Access is something that, as a government and working with Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador and others, we always face challenges being an island when it comes to access. We do have a working group as government, along with HNL. And the car rental agencies, we meet quarterly to talk about ways that we can increase the fleet, maintain the fleet. They've been growing their fleet. I talked to an operator yesterday, actually, and they're getting new fleet in. As of yesterday, there are car rentals available throughout this summer. In each week this summer, they are becoming very limited. Don't get me wrong, and it's something that we monitor, and they will fill up. Unfortunately, likely there will come a time for this season that car rental availability will become a major problem, a major struggle. So we encourage people always to book early. And not only that, the earlier a person books, it gives the car rental agencies a way to project and predict. One of the challenges being an island is we can't shuffle cars. For example, if we were Halifax and Moncton, for example, and there was a major event in Halifax or vice versa in Moncton, the rental companies would, shuffle cars around. So, the earlier people can book, it works best, obviously, for our operators. It also works best for the car rental companies because they can, work with their fleets, watch their numbers and stuff. So, we encourage people to book early. Right now, there is availability throughout the province for this season. And, again, it's a struggle. There is a role for us, and it's to work with our operators and H&L and others. We hosted our spring leadership summit earlier this week here in St. John's, and it was one of the topics that we talked about. But when we get together with the industry, we always talk about access, whether it's seats coming in, Marine Atlantic coming in, car rental availabilities. We've seen progress this season with the launch of Uber. Uber is now available on the entire Avalon, and we really hope that as they get their footing, they start moving west, because that is another piece of accessibility that's a challenge. But, we'll face those challenges.
Yeah, I mean, Uber will be good for certain types of travel, but for someone who, say, for instance, lands in St. John's and wants to go to the Fisher's Loft and maybe tour around, Uber wouldn't necessarily be part of that equation.
No, absolutely, and that's why I said, it's not the solution, but it's a part of a solution, because it's the entire piece of access when you're an island, no matter what island jurisdiction you talk to around the world. You will find that, tourism on an island brings unique challenges, but in saying that, it also brings very unique and strong opportunities.
Yeah, and fair enough. And I mean, the Rental Car Association of Canada has said quite clearly that the manufacturers are not giving preference to fleet renewal. They're giving preference to the retailer. So they're all struggling. They want to buy more cars for their fleet because, of course, most of them sold it off during the beginning of the pandemic. So tricky piece of business. Let's talk about access. So there are some corners applauding the thrice weekly WestJet flight from St. John's International to London's Gatwick. Can you tell us exactly how this works? Because if there's $3.75 million for the airport authorities to try to enhance their business, bring more routes in, can you give us some idea about how that money's divvied up? And more consequently, how does it actually work? Can you give us some understanding about the relationship between us and WestJet?
Yeah, so the relationship is between the direct relationship, the contractual relationship is between St. John's International Airport and WestJet in this case, or it would be other airport authorities around the province enter into relationships. We actually provide funds directly to the airport authority. Those arrangements are between, again, the airport authorities and the airlines. And there's a lot of proprietary stuff there. So we work strongly, closely with our airport authorities. They go out and do a very good job, quite frankly, in developing routes, whether it's the new UK route, which I might add is doing extremely well. And when you look at our tourism recovery last year, our non-resident visitations were up 13% over 2019. We still benchmark 2019. And one of the lagging remaining parts of that has been trans-border and international travel. And now with the international flight this year that's selling really strong, we hope to see those numbers recover. But again, the relationships between the airport authorities and the airlines are between those two parties.
Sure. I mean, I understand the two entities involved, but certainly at some point the provincial government, when talking about $3.75 million, must have a base understanding of how much goes to St. John's International and for what reason. So how much of the 3.75 goes to St. John's?
So at this point in time, it's up to $3.75 million. I think last year our commitment to St. John's was, I think, $500K that we actually draw down on with them. And I think last year we did a similar arrangement with Deer Lake. I think that was approximately $300,000. So that number of in the figures of the 3.75 is up to.
Okay. Now when we talk about flights, we've heard concerns specifically come from Jordan Brown. Subsidizing flight for international travel and what that might mean for uptick in tourism numbers and out-of-country money, which is pretty good for the economy. But it's the concept of the prohibitive cost of traveling inside the province itself. You know, quoting some $2,500 from Nain to St. John's, from Lab West to St. John's, $1,500. So is there any action that needs to be taken on behalf of your government? Because it can indeed have a tourism component, is why I ask you. Because someone might want to go to visit Red Bay, the World UNESCO Heritage Site. So what about flights inside the province?
Absolutely. That is a priority, and it's actually a priority that Premier Fury and his three Atlantic colleagues have worked on. There was a EOI, or request for proposals, issued late last year for connectivity, interprovincial connectivity, and Atlantic Canadian regional connectivity, because one of the things that seems to not have recovered, quite frankly, through the pandemic was regional connectivity and interprovincial connectivity. So that RFP results are in, and what that does is that will allow all four Atlantic provinces, and in particular us in Newfoundland and Labrador, to look at how we get at some of that, because you made a very good point. If you think about I have these conversations with operators in central Newfoundland and in Labrador regularly, because it's about the connectivity of how you get from St. John's, even to Gander, or St. John's to Goose Bay, or St. John's to St. Anthony. And that's extremely important chapter piece that we're trying to build. And some of the progress that's been made there is in PAL's new arrangement with Air Canada, where, they are Air Canada's regional flyer now in Atlantic Canada. It opens up an opportunity, and I hope will continue to even open further when you think about code share and the fact that a person could now buy a ticket that would include, an Air Canada ticket that goes, Toronto, St. John's, Gander, as an example. So, and that brings costs down, because obviously you get into the Air Canada network, So every time I meet with my colleagues, and in particular my colleagues from, northern Canada, regional air travel is expensive. It's not unique to Newfoundland and Labrador. It's something that's, we always try to address. Last year we made some changes to the Medical Transportation Assistance Program that now gives, right up front, a $1,000 voucher to people who, on the Northern Peninsula and in Labrador, who, have to avail of that service, and those to offset some of those costs. But, as we build out our network, and hopefully as the networks build out from the airlines themselves, you will see a reduction in cost. But it's certainly a challenge. But to your other point, when we talk about non-resident visitors travel, that's extremely important to our economy and getting people in here, because every single dollar that comes in here from a non-resident is a new dollar.
Yeah, I mean, eco-travel, adventure tourism, big part of the tourism scene. A couple of quick ones before we run out of time. So rental cars is a shortage, and it's cost prohibitive for many. When the province lists all sorts of hospitality offerings, whether it be Airbnb or B&Bs or hotels or what have you, do we have an active, updated list of individuals who have their car on the sharing platform that is Turo? Because when people look at rentals, and maybe don't even consider Turo, which has been a bit of a backstop in the rental car industry, do we actively promote that is an option for people considering traveling to the province?
It is. We've done some promotions with Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador. The uptick in that program hasn't, in fairness, hasn't been great. But, that is always an option for people to look at Turo. Again, any option that we can get out there, to your point, is extremely important. But I think the best thing that we can do when we talk about rental cars in this province is to encourage people to book early. And the other thing that, and rightfully so, and the rental car agencies, and not only rental car agencies, anybody who's investing in tourism and hospitality in Newfoundland and Labrador, they want us to build the season. Because, you're a car rental company and you have X in your fleet, and your fleet is entirely booked out in July and August, but come September, in the shoulder season, your fleet is now a lot of your fleet is not active, and that's really hard for them to make long-term investments. So some of the investments that we're making as a province is in shoulder seasons. We know Marine Atlantic, and I know this is not a rental car issue because people that use Marine Atlantic typically drive, but Marine Atlantic is now offering discounts in the spring season and typically in the fall season. We work with our airline partners to promote non-traditional tourism season, like we will work with our airline partners to promote, October, November, December, May, June, because the bigger window of tourism, the bigger demand that we can create in outside of July and August really makes the investment for rental car companies and tourism operators in general much easier to actually get behind and invest in.
Last one, and this one is a big one. So between the province and the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, there was a $500,000 invest to look at the fixed link. So the federal government has adopted it as part of their policy agenda. Same for this province and the Liberals' position on this. Now, Hatch did some updated numbers in 2018. ARP came in behind them to show much different numbers, whether it be cost and time to build and or the frequency of traffic. But it looks like Liberals here and in Ottawa are still behind the fixed link. Has it advanced at all?
Patty, I haven't been in that portfolio, quite frankly, now for over 3 years. I was actually there in 2018 when this work was done. And it's an important piece of work. But the other, pardon the pun, but the other link here is the highway on the southern shore, the north shore of Quebec, because, I think it's the 183. The 183 development, and then when I was transportation minister, I met on a couple occasions with my Quebec counterpart, and it was really trying to figure out, where the timelines of Quebec's investment would be coming up that southern part of their province to connect into our province, because that's the efficient route. That's a very important. If you go back and look at the Hatch work, it will show that highway on the north shore of Quebec is an integral part of making a fixed link feasible. It's Highway 138. They're talking about a couple of $1 billion.
Not to be nitpicky, it just happens to be what it is. I would have thought that tourism would be one of the key conversations regarding whether or not there's merit behind this type of investment. That's why I asked you.
Absolutely, it is. And if you look at some of our, growth opportunities, we're seeing a larger, we're seeing strong growth from the Quebec tourist using the Trans-Labrador Highway since the Trans-Labrador Highway was completed and paved. So, there's tremendous opportunity here. But again, when we look at access, I think it's only 20-25% of our visitors actually bring their own transportation. Air is really the tourism, the way non-residents are getting to Newfoundland and Labrador. I think over 350,000 visitors last year by air and around 100,000 visitors by auto. Now, that being said, obviously, if we had that connection, that would certainly increase. But a lot of the work that we do around when you look at tourism, and especially the domestic tourist, the domestic tourist has a very, compared to international tourists, has a short vacation window, and any drive time becomes a prohibitive challenge for Newfoundland and Labrador when you think about the amount of time that our Canadian domestic traveler takes off for vacation.
Sure, but I suppose if you dovetail that with the shortage of rental cars, maybe there's more consideration given to driving and traveling here via Marine Atlantic. I'm late for the break, but I appreciate the time, Minister. Thank you.
Okay, have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Steve Crocker is the Minister of Tourism, Culture, Arts, Recreation. Mary, you stay right there, talk about issues on the Bay de Verde Peninsula. Doran wants to talk about World Energy GH2. And Craig Dyer made mention of Canada Post looking for a change in its mandate. He's the president of Cup W. He's there as well. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Mary. You're on the air.
Hello. How are are you?
I'm very well, Mary. How about you?
Well, I'm pretty good, too, I must say. I just got to get this off my chest, okay? But I'm going to say the whole three things, and then you can come back to me because I may forget. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is Steve Crocker in transportation? No, he's not, is he?
No. He was.
Who is? Do you know?
The transportation minister is John Abbott.
John Abbott. I thought so. There you see. Getting a bit slow this morning, Patty.
No worries.
Okay, now, it's concerning Tom Osborne. Now, we know full well. How does he stand in that camera and look right innocent and say there's nothing wrong with the healthcare system when we all know it's nothing but a disaster and the system is all gone chaos?
I don't think he's ever said there's no problems in healthcare, all the same. And interestingly enough, Minister Osborne's coming on the show, I'm told, after the 11 o'clock news. So, yeah.
God love you. And the John Effort, if they're so interested about people, the roads from Beatty Bird to Old Perlican, Patty, if you don't break an axle coming over there, nobody will. I don't know why they don't have that road fixed.
I don't know. So you just said John Effort. Did you mean John Abbott? I just want to make sure I'm on the right track here.
Yes, he's on transportation, isn't he?
Yes, he is. When you said John Effort, I thought we were going to talk about something regarding the fishery. But yes, John Abbott is the Transportation Infrastructure Minister. You're right.
And there's going to be a bad accident there one day. The roads are... It's just disgusting. You're taking a chance going from Beatty Bird to Old Perlican. And I'm really not exaggerating. The people can tell you that. And another thing, I'm sorry, but I got to get it off. Over in Old Perlican, the hospital in Old Perlican, the doctors and the nurses are run ragged. I just had to go over there the other day for some blood tests. They were literally sitting on the floor. There was that many patients there to be seen. And I think it's so pitiful that they are running right till they can't run no more. The doctors, the nurses, and everybody else that works there, the receptionists, like it's just gone all downhill. And I can't believe it when I see it, Patty. Because no matter when you go, it is there. Patients sitting on the floor, the whole area full, not counting the emergency. And then I want to take all the hats off to the nurses. They do a wonderful, wonderful job. And if people ask where I am from, I'm from Beatty Bird in the trailer park. I call it the trailer park now because all we have around us now is trailer parks. And that's my beep, and I'm glad you listened to me.
And I'm glad you called, Mary. You take good care of yourself. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, anytime. Come on and take a picture of the trailer. Have a good one, honey.
You too, Mary. All the best.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Let's go ahead and take a break for the news. When we come back, as advertised, Craig Dyer is the president of Cup W, the local president of Cup W. Duran Felix is there to talk world energy and whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number one. Say good morning to the local president at Cup W. That's Craig Dyer. Good morning, Craig. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you?
Best kind. How about you?
A bit busy these days.
Yeah, me too. So Cup W is the Canadian Union of Postal Workers, just so people know. Okay, so interestingly in the news, last week we're told that Canada Post had posted a $748 million loss last year before tax, $3 billion over the last 6 years, now asking for a change to the mandate. What do you make of it?
It's very interesting, Paddy. We've been negotiating for our two biggest bargaining units for the past 6 months, And this isn't the first time Canada Post has done this. It's like they go into the back room and they go to the top shelf, dust off the playbook and say, okay, it's 6 months, what do we do now? Let's generate some fear. So they post these huge losses, which of course we're going to challenge, but now our members are fearful. The public is questioning, and of course our MPs are getting involved. So, I gave some media earlier the week, and the question is, did we really lose $748 million? A little bit of history is, for the last couple of years, the corporation has been investing hundreds of millions of dollars in new technology and new facilities. There's a beautiful facility in Ontario, and they're investing in BC. And, of course, they're investing in vehicles. We have 12 brand-new vehicles here in St. John's, Newfoundland, that are sitting on a parking lot for the last month not being able to be used.
Because of what?
We really don't know. We just had a major reorganization in St. John's in 2023, 2024, and this is what the public needs to know. Every 5 to 7 years in St. John's, they come in and they reorganize the way that we deliver the mail, and they take into consideration the volumes increasing or decreasing. And this latest round, we actually lost 14 positions because the mail volume has decreased. So that's a savings for the corporation, but they're not talking about that. The government and the corporation are talking about this alternate day delivery. Those considerations are taking into consideration when this happens, right? That's the big thing that the public don't know, and I really need our MPs to listen closely, because the sky isn't falling. The corporation is making adjustments due to the volumes. So, to say that we need alternate day delivery, that's already taken into consideration when we do these restructures. And and I know that we don't get mail every day, and that's a part of that process. But when we do get mail, that route is structured based on that information.
So is there not an adjustment required if the volume numbers are what they are? So Canada Post, in their annual report, they say since 2006, there's been a big decrease in letter mail. 5.5 billion pieces of mail in 2006, $2.2 billion in 2023. So does that not speak to the need for there to be some adjustment to delivery schedules and how routes are structured and how people are assigned?
And that's what's really bothering the local executive, our members, and some public is they're not looking at the root problem. And the root problem is poor management decisions. They're spending like you wouldn't believe, but calling poor mouth. We have some huge fundamental concerns, and I'll just speak locally for a second. Last year, the corporation lost, I'm going to say, over $1 million in poor management decisions by labor relations decisions. So we go in, everybody wants a job, everybody wants to provide service, and I'll tell you, the men and women in St. John's, they take pride in their job. But the corporation comes in and makes huge changes, not necessary, and very quickly, internally, the processing of the mail, we were noted as probably the best processing facility in Canada, and they come in and they change it all. Why? We don't know. But now we're not doing the same job. The productivity is not there. And our members are upset because they took pride in their job, but management made a change. They did a huge restructure outside with the letter carriers, the men and women who deliver mail to your house, and we lost 14 jobs. That was supposed to be a savings, but what they put in is actually costing them money in overtime. So, we sit at the table, we try and have reasonable conversations, but they choose not to, and they have their own agenda. And, of course, we end up in front of a third party. And it's noted. Last year we arbitrated. I think I might have talked to you about this before. But one of the decisions cost St. John's over $700,000, and the third party identified St. John's as a toxic workplace. Our members want to go in and do an honest day's work, get paid, go home and enjoy their family, but management, for some reason, is not allowing that to happen.
So, how so? Like, what exactly? Give me an example of a toxic workplace relationship.
So, for 35 years, I've worked at the post office. Internally, we had sections. You had a forward, a local, an automation, all these sections, and people used their seniority, whether it was a preference or a medical reason, to bid into these jobs. So once you're into a job, you're doing it really well, you're doing it repetitiously, you're very productive. What the corporation came in on January 14th, took down all the walls, and now everybody in that facility is doing every job. And how can you get good at something if you're doing it every 3 to 4 weeks? And some of these jobs are very technical and need training, and the training is not there, right? These sections were put in for the purpose of using your seniority. There was a huge health and safety component with these, and the employer came in and tore it down. So we're still taking on that battle, and our members are really upset that the work that they did prior to January was fantastic, and now because of this decision, they're not able to get the work done because of the processes that they put in place. That's huge. That's very concerning. And then we take it to the external workers. They implemented a thing called SSD. That's a conversation for another day. But they went too deep. They took into consideration the declining volumes, the increase in parcels, all those factors, but they took 14 jobs out of St. John's that were there on March 17th that weren't there on March 19th. So, we sit down and we try and have conversations. We try and show that, our experience, we got a lot of expertise on the union side, and we're not yelling at them or anything like that. We're just saying it works better this way. And then, of course, their decision is not to do it. Right, so we're there trying to make the St. John's a better place to work, and there's these hurdles by local management that are just barricading us and tying our hands.
So, is there a rationale offered as to why everyone is all of a sudden performing all of these tasks, as opposed to being, experienced in one area or another and sticking with it and being proficient and efficient at it? I don't quite understand that.
I don't mean to be curt, but I would like to have that answer too. Right. We've talked for months on that particular topic, and the corporation has said, no, this is their plan. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't do anything for the workers or the public. And, obviously there's some kind of plan that they're not willing to share with us.
All right, a couple of quickies before we run out of time. Insofar as you don't believe that the Corp lost $748 million before tax, obviously in an annual report there would have to be some sort of audited financial statement. So where and why is the belief that that number is not accurate?
And what I'm saying is I would like for a third party or the government to go in and have a look at the books, because the facility in Ontario cost $500 million. Is that taken into consideration in this loss? The cost of labor relations in St. John's. We don't have to be in front of a third party all the time. We can sit down and talk. And I'll be honest with you, our success rate locally is huge. So, that's an inherited cost to local management because their agenda is different, and both parties signed a collective agreement, and that's what we got to abide by. A third party is not going to say that the union's right if the language doesn't support it. And then, of course, the other big thing, Patty, is I got a report that there was a recent federal government standing committee on government operations and estimates, and Canada Post was asked to talk about or give numbers of the bonuses that thousands and thousands of supervisors, managers, directors, and executive gets, and they chose not to give a number. So we find out 2 weeks ago that supervisors across the country, thousands and thousands, got bonuses. To what level? We honestly don't know. We understand that it could be 4% or greater. So why are we giving out bonuses if we're not performing? That's a huge upsetting point in our local and across the country, right? Why can we give out bonuses if we're not performing? And how much does that cost?
Yeah, fair enough. It reminds me of when Nalcor was giving out bonuses, underperforming to say the very least. They say, well, some of the bonuses are directly related to health and safety and days lost. Well, come on. That's sort of your number one priority is a safe workplace. Last one. Certainly some of the volume going through Canada Post has been upended by things like Amazon and the vast majority of courier companies that can offer some savings to businesses and individuals. Does Canada Post, to your knowledge, have any financial ownings or interest in some of the couriers, Purolator, FedEx, or otherwise? Of
course. Purolator is, I think it's a 98% ownership. It's Canada Post Purolator. But we also used to have Intellicom that got sold off many years ago. But the problem that the public don't know is that all these other courier companies, some are great, some are low cost, no health and safety. Rural Canada exists in that field based on Canada Post. It's called the last mile. No for-profit courier company is going to drive up to or drive out to Trepassey or drive up to Port Rexon or go to Labrador because it's not profitable. So these companies actually bring their product to us, and we deliver it the last mile. So, if we get out of the business or we go alternate day delivery, that's going to have a huge impact on all these companies, right? But at the same time, we're the ones that are keeping the cost down low. And, we want to work with Canada Post to have financial stability, and we've talked about it many times, Betty, you and I, and you mentioned it in your preamble, elder check-in, low-fee postal banking, high-speed internet, electronic charging stations. So, we're at the table, we're trying to work with the corporation, but for some reason, all they want to do is attack the worker. And what you got to remember is that these workers pay taxes. No, the public doesn't pay for Canada Post, but we get an income and we pay taxes, and we're involved in the community. Sherry said it earlier about the nurses. We are in the communities, we are paying taxes, we are buying product. So that's key here. They shouldn't be attacking the workers. They should be looking for alternatives and cleaning up their own house.
Craig, as usual, I appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this.
And Patty, I'm assuming that we're going to be talking a lot more now. It's been a quiet couple of years, but as we're 6 months into negotiations, God only knows what can happen.
I look forward to it. Thanks, Craig.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's Craig Dwyer, he's the local president of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, with lots of healthcare conversation, obviously. The minister responsible is Tom Osborne. He joins us after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the Liberal member for Waterford Valley. He's the Minister of Health and Community Services. That's Tom Osborne. Minister Osborne, you're on the air.
Thanks for having me on your show, Patty. Always appreciate the opportunity. Wanted to chat a little bit about the LTN issue and the proclamation, and just to assure LTNs in the province, they are highly regarded and highly respected by government. To put some context to the proclamation was signed by both myself and Yvette Coffey as a proclamation to their members, recognizing their members. But we also had from NAPE a proclamation that they requested recognizing LPNs and PCAs and their members for Nursing Week as well. We are happy to sign both proclamations. We understand CUPE also have licensed practical nurses, and I know that they value their nurses, but we didn't have a proclamation from CUPE. We do, in any media that I've done talking about nursing in our province, I often refer to nursing as practical nurses, registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, for example. And people can go back through and look at media clips, news clips, where we've referenced this. So just to give the assurance to our licensed practical nurses that there was no omission for sure, that the proclamation that's circulating was an RNU proclamation to recognize their members specifically. But we do recognize, and both myself and the Premier did a video which was put out, I think, on Monday of this week, recognizing nursing in general, because nursing does include practical nurses, registered nurses, and licensed practical nurses. Also, wanted to give an update to some of the emails that I've received from licensed practical nurses, wondering about classification, for example. So there is a review of roles and classifications being done by the Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services. They are in the process of that review, and I know that there's meetings arranged with the health services and other stakeholders, including unions, or will be arranged. The meetings are being arranged by Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services, but we've been meeting with Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services. I've had meetings with Jerry Earle, president of NAPE, who have raised the issue of classification as well, and I have met with the LPN group within NAPE, and there's a roadshow currently undertaken by Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services getting into high schools, and that was a request by NAPE as well, where we are getting into high schools to encourage high school students to look at health professions, and in particular LPN. We are developing a grant or an incentive for high school students as part of that process to look at LPN because it is one of the areas where we have a shortage in the province. But we've also, we've expanded the number of practical nursing seats. We've done a study, funded a study to look at attrition from the practical nursing program. We're taking steps to improve student success. There are tuition grant programs in development, as well as bursaries that are already in place. 2 student coordinators put in place to support the practical nursing program and student success. And we've developed a distance offering for practical nurses as well. We value our nursing professionals in the province of all disciplines.
Understood. And I know that NAPE has put out a proclamation. The version that's flying around only has your signature and does not include the vet coffees. Fair enough. So I'd like to get through a few quick ones before I get to the news. So we've heard from David Diamond about a plan to reduce the reliance on travel nurses. You've called them in the past a necessary evil. The problem then becomes the lack of awareness that the union and maybe some people who left the public to work in the travel agency world, they didn't know that they were facing a 12-month pause upon wanting to return to the public service. That's going to complicate an already complicated problem. Are we going to do away with that clause and allow travel nurses to come immediately back into the public fold?
So my understanding, Paddy, and I will ensure the details are accurate as I'm giving them to you today, but Newfoundland and Labrador nurses that have signed to be agency nurses in other provinces can come back unencumbered. The complication is the agency nurses from Ontario or Nova Scotia or Alberta that have come to this province to practice as an agency nurse. I know that when this happened, and prior to my arrival in the department, but stakeholders had wanted a protection where nurses in this province could not be poached by the agencies. So asking for that clause in the contract, obviously, those clauses are reciprocal. So the agencies had asked the health authority here not to poach the agency nurses that were coming in from other provinces. So it's not our own nurses. Our own nurses are gladly welcomed and encouraged to come back from practicing as an agency nurse in another province and join our public service again. That door is open. But it's nurses from other provinces who came here as agency nurses that our health authority is not able to poach.
Fair enough. So we know there's a nursing shortage. Regardless of the fact that we've recruited X number, there's still a shortage out there on the floors. I acknowledge that not everybody can work exactly where they want. Not everyone can be a nurse on 4 North B at the Health Sciences Centre. But why are we only offering full-time contracts to nursing graduates that's on a temporary basis as opposed to full-time? Are we simply just trying to save money by not having them enrolled in the full benefits package? Because if we lose any number of nurses to another jurisdiction because they have been offered a full-time permanent job, let's just say Nova Scotia, because they've been here, so Saskatchewan trying to get some of our healthcare pros, why are we not offering full-time permanent positions to registered nursing grads in this province? Because if we lose any, that's a bad news story.
It would be if, but the Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services have assured me and guaranteed me there are full-time permanent jobs for any and every grad. The reality is if somebody wants to work on a particular floor, a particular ward, or in a particular community, there may not be a full-time permanent position available where they want to go, but there are full-time permanent positions available in the province. And no different than teachers, teachers who want to work in St. John's, for example, coming out of post-secondary with their education degree, can't always get a position in St. John's, sometimes have to put in a year or two in another community, but keep applying in St. John's. So, it's very similar. But the health authority has guaranteed me that there are full-time permanent jobs for anybody who wants one.
So, where's the focus for permanent full-time offerings? Is it in rural parts of the province solely, or is it also offer people who can work at St. Clair's or the Health Sciences or somewhere in a clinic in Mount Pearl or the Northeast Avalon? So help me understand where the preference is for permanent full-time.
Well, I mean, it depends. I may give you an answer to that today that might have been accurate a month ago, but not today. It depends on when positions are filled and what positions are vacant. And positions are posted, full-time permanent positions throughout the province are posted. And, whenever a full-time permanent position is available that a new grad is qualified and able to enter into, because, some of the positions may require additional experience or additional training. But whenever there's a position posted, it could be in many many locations throughout the province.
I wish we had more time, but this has to be my last one, unfortunately. Now that it's Mental Health Awareness Week, we know that there was some attempt at bringing psychiatric nurses into the fold here. It requires some amendments of legislation and the registered or the college to represent them and what have you. Are we any further down the road? Because when I look around the country, these positions have proven to be extremely beneficial.
Absolutely, and we want them here. It is a discipline that we want in the province. I had attempted, and there was a discussion with another jurisdiction in Canada where, as a pilot program, they would oversee the psychiatric nurses in this province. Unfortunately, their legislation did not allow that, so the pilot couldn't proceed. However, we are bringing legislation into the legislature. That legislation is being vetted through stakeholders and through Legislative Council here. That legislation will, in the near future, be introduced into our legislature to allow for psychiatric nurses in this province as a regulated profession. I'm disappointed that the pilot couldn't go ahead, but the other provincial jurisdiction that was willing to do that with us, their legislation wouldn't allow their oversight of psychiatric nurses in this province. So we are going for the full meal deal and having it a regulated profession in this province.
Wish we had more time, but we'll touch base again soon. Thanks for doing this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Paddy.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. It's Tom Osborne, the Minister of Health and Community Services. Time for the news. When we come back, Duran, you're next. We appreciate your patience. He wants to talk about World Energy GH2. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 5. Good morning, Duran. You're on the air.
Hi, how are you doing, Paddy?
Doing okay. How about you?
Not too bad. I want to say most of the talk about green energy, not just world energy specifically, but the green energy push that's going on in Newfoundland right now. When we look at everything that's going on, they're speaking about when they do decide to ship the hydrogen, it will be in the form of ammonia. And once it does reach market, mostly converted to fertilizer.
The ammonia portion,
Yeah, the ammonia portion. Yep. And so here's the one thing, though, that they're negating to inform people of. The big push has been talking about the carbon emissions, the high levels of carbon dioxide in the air, and they're touting this as the solution to combat the global temperatures rising and whatnot. However, what they're failing to reveal to locals and people in general is the fact that when you burn ammonia or hydrogen as a fuel, and even use it as a form of fertilizer, they are releasing nitrous oxide into the atmosphere. Now, nitrous oxide is 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide, okay? And nitrous...
You're breaking up, but I mean, when hydrogen is produced through renewables, is near zero greenhouse gas emissions upon using it, right? Yeah, the connection's terrible, Duran. I can't hear you.
Oh.
Try again. Let's see if we can clear it up. Duran, are you still there? Dave, what do you want me to do here with Duran? Okay, I'll just put him on hold. Dave, you speak to him. Maybe we can get to a landline or just clear up that connection, because I like to hear what he says, but I can't hear him, period. Let's go to line number 4. Say good morning to the president of the NL Nurse Practitioner Association. That's Travis Shepherd. Good morning, Travis. You're on the air.
Hi, good morning, Patty.
Welcome to the program.
Hi, I wanted to, I got a email this morning from you guys to assess the proclamation component, and I appreciate that the minister has spoken about that this morning, about the limits of the proclamation, how that was signed by the Registered Nurses Union, and how there was another proclamation signed by NAPE. So I think that clears up a few things. However, I would like to say that the proclamation for Nurses Week, National Nurses Week, is still limited, and the proclamation doesn't include private nurse practitioners in private practice who are not currently part of the publicly funded system. So I would like to just say Happy Nurses Week to all nurses in the province, LPNs, registered nurses, and nurse practitioners in both the public and the private sector. So I just wanted to say that before you this morning. I also wanted to acknowledge that the NLNPA had actually put forward a proposal to government on April the 26th to compensation funding model to have those private MP-led clinics covered by government. And we haven't heard anything back from government on that initiative yet, but we have put a proposal forward to join the publicly funded system. So I just wanted to make the public aware of that as well. Another thing, too, I wanted to mention in terms of the roles. I'm not sure if everyone in the public is clear about the roles of licensed practical nurses, registered nurses, and nurse practitioners, but I will say we're all very much so interconnected, and we're all critical to the system. Licensed practical nurses work side by side with registered nurses and with nurse practitioners.
Before we get any further, Travis, you say the model that you proposed to the government, was that as fundamental as private sector nurse practitioners being able to bill MCP directly? Is that what that means?
Well, it's not MCP. It's a different type of model, because MCP apparently is not something that the government is interested in entertaining. But MCP is a funding model itself. So what we're proposing is something different in that's more sustainable, that provides higher quality of care. It's a proposal that does support private initiatives, but can also be lend itself to the public system as it exists, and offer nurse practitioners more options to practice outside of the health authority and have a bigger reach.
For the general public, why would that be beneficial to us? I understand what it would mean for nurse practitioners, the fair ball, that's who you represent, but just describe why that would be a benefit to the general public.
Well, the one thing that this model would allow us to do is allow us to panel or roster patients. So we will be able to attach patients to clinics throughout the province wherever an MP exists or wishes to exist. So right here in Corner Brook, for example, I have a small private MP-led clinic, and there's a couple of nurse practitioners that work there, but we have to accept credit card payments, debit, cash for a service. So we keep the fee as low as possible to provide those essential services, but that's the only way we can exercise our right to private practice, because we have no way to bill. Unlike, for example, we talk about the word private, and privatization probably too general. But, for example, our physician colleagues have multiple, of course, private practices, and those private practices provide essential primary health care services. So when you go see your family doctor, you're going to a private clinic, and the compensation comes through MCP. So we're looking for something similar to that. So that would allow us to panel or roster patients and have continuity of care, and then patients would have providers for the long term, and MPs would have their clinics supported.
Okay, understood, because, you know, I fall into this as well. Sometimes I speak to something that I might understand, but I don't elaborate. Consequently, people don't know what I'm talking about, and I try to be mindful of that. That's why I wanted to give you an opportunity to explain the benefit to not only your members, but to the general public and potential patients. I think you wanted to go down the road of people understanding the difference between the training, the accreditation, and the roles or responsibilities of registered nurses, nurse practitioners, licensed practical nurses, and I think think that'd be helpful because we've talked about expanding scope of practice and the fact that even inside a collaborative care clinic, not everybody needs to see the doctor. There are other healthcare professionals in there that are 100% up to the task of taking care of your ill or ailment. So go ahead and describe what you think people need to know.
Yeah, and before I move to that, I just want to say one more thing about this compensation model, because the other piece of it that's important is that to recognize that nurse practitioners have varying abilities to practice. So say, for example, you have a nurse practitioner on a maternity leave and they still want to maintain some practice of a couple of days a week. Or if you have an NP who is semi-retired and they want to practice a little bit. Or you have an NP as an educator like we do throughout the entire country and would like to integrate themselves in practice. So if they want to do that, this compensation model would allow them to roster a specific number of patients. It could be, say, 300 patients, or it could go all the way up to, say, 1,500 patients. And they could enter on a lower end and have some impact as opposed to no impact on the system, or they could decide to take on more patients or join collaborative practices. So they could also join their physician colleagues. There is a model out there currently that, for example, if NPs want to work in private practice, physicians can hire them to work in private practice. So that does exist, but that, of course, is under the terms of the physician. So NPs need to have their own autonomy to do that. Now I'll move to the roles. So in terms of our scope, I think that's the biggest difference. Licensed practical nurses work side by side with registered nurses and NPs. LPNs would deal with more of the stable clients. Now, I say that loosely because some of their patients are not quite stable, all right? But LPNs typically work with more of the stabilized patients. Registered nurses deal with more of the acute patient. So on a cardiac ward, someone having chest pain, for example. Once the person's stabilized, they could step the care down to the LPN. Nurse practitioners have a scope that's broader, where they can diagnose, prescribe, treat conditions, order tests, things that you would see in a primary healthcare clinic or in a hospital setting. So there's quite a range there in terms of the scope.
And fair enough, I don't think people are aware of that. You know, everything's thrown into a catch-all. Everyone's working inside the envelope, the same envelope, when that's not necessarily true. Before we run out of time, would you like to describe some of these differences in job descriptions, what have you, between your organization and other healthcare pros, especially in the nursing world?
Yeah, in terms of the association, so that's really important to understand. So the Newfoundland Labrador Nurse Practitioner Association represents all nurse practitioners in the province of Newfoundland, and we fall under an association called the Nurse Practitioner Association of Canada. So we're a group of nurse practitioners, and that includes both public and private sector NPs. As for other areas, we have, of course, different associations for different disciplines throughout the province, but we also have something called the Canadian Nurses Association. The Canadian Nurses Association represents registered nurses, nurse practitioners, licensed and registered practical nurses, and also registered psychiatric nurses. So that's more far-reaching, but our association deals specifically with NPs, both in the public and private sector.
Understood. We're just about out of time, Travis. I'll give you the final thoughts if you have anything else to add.
Government needs to provide us with a compensation model to increase our autonomy and support us into the future. Alberta has moved forward. The BC has moved forward with compensation models, and it's the trend. It will get us up to speed. It would allow us to roster or panel patients where we can and how we can, and that will have a significant impact on public accessibility healthcare system. It would support, it would motivate us, it would encourage us, and it would have the tremendous impact on the future of healthcare.
Really appreciate your time, Travis, as usual. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Travis Shepherd is the president of the Dave took me before I could deal with it. Okay, let's take our final break. Duran, hopefully you're next. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let us go to line number one. Good morning, Kimberly Pilgrim. You're on the air.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How about you?
I'm great.
So you're great, and probably even greater now that you've won a pretty massive prize. So inside the world of ambitions, you're trying to do something, quote, potentially huge because of what? What did you win? Tell us about the prize.
So I'm a co-lead with Untitled, which is a team from Northern Labrador, Nunavut, that is striving to create a center in Hopedale that helps the community with a whole range of language and culture programming. So we're striving to be a non-governmental and not-for-profit programming initiative. We are all in Whitehorse right now, or most of our team's in Whitehorse right now, for the Arctic Inspiration Prize, which we are very fortunate in having been awarded $1 million from for this goal. And it's very surreal to us because a year ago, this was all a dream for us. We were sitting down, we're all youth and we're good friends, and we were just thinking, like, what does our region need to become better and help out its people? So we put together an application and a team, and here we are.
Congratulations. It's a pretty big achievement. I believe it's the first time a project in Nunavut has been awarded this Arctic Inspiration Prize. Am I right?
Yes, it is. It's the first time somebody's been awarded $1 million. There are a few different categories, and groups have won in the past, but nobody has taken home the grand prize. And I also wanted to mention that there's 2 other groups who are Nunavut based who are at the awards ceremony with us here in Whitehorse who won as well. One of them was a Hebron and Nutak relocations, reunions. So they're going to take elders back to Hebron and Nutak to reconnect where they were evicted from about 65 years ago. And then there is also a youth prize awarded to a group who is looking to help create a Inuktitut app. So it's a big win for Nunavut here in Whitehorse, and we're all very excited to be taking home some money to the province.
And in total, just shy of $1.4 million, so significant monies. There was one pretty interesting quote in the news story I read. It said, "We do have intergenerational trauma, but we also have a lot of intergenerational strength." And that wasn't said by you, but I'm sure that's a message or a sentiment that you share. What do you think that means to the listener?
Yes, I completely agree with that. So to me, that means, like, yes, we all, like, each of us team members have had struggles in our lives, and our families have had struggles, especially our grandparents' generations and before, dealing with colonialism and just a lot of things that were imposed by the government and church that weren't fair, like things like relocations and things like not being able to speak Inuktitut and not being able to practice culture properly because it was looked down upon and discriminated against. So we are using the strength that has remained throughout the generations and that has grown stronger to be able to do these things that our elders and our ancestors either weren't allowed to do or were shamed in some way. We're now proud to say that we are able to do these things without so much shame and discrimination. So we want to promote healing with our programming, and we want to honor our elders and do the things that they like to see us do. We've gotten a lot of good feedback, and we were in a presentation yesterday, and I really liked what a speaker said. He's an elder here from Whitehorse, and he said that yes, all of our projects are innovative and creative, but we're not the first people to think of this. It's something that we were inspired by our communities, and that's who we have to thank, and that's who this is for. So although we're like the figureheads, this is something that was community made, and we wouldn't be here without the support of everybody.
What do you think the timelines are for actually getting this cultural centre built? Do you have any idea?
So right now we're looking at things that are already available to us in Hopedale, so buildings that are already existing, but we are planning on getting situated in a center in a building, like in a main one this summer. So It's still like in the planning process because this million was like to get us really situated. But this summer we'll be starting some programming, so we'll likely be using renting out already existing places, like our Department of Health and Social Services, and there's a few different buildings in Hopedale, like the Nanook Center and the school, that we might be able to work out of. Our first workshops are going to be comic making, so we're going to teach the traditional way to sew black bottom sealskin boots, which is a bit rare in Nunavut these days. So that's going to be our first priority. And then in the fall, we're going to start with language lessons. So my co-leads, Nick and Vanessa, are very good with the language. I'm not as good with Inuktitut yet, but Nick and Vanessa are looking to start online language lessons. So they'll be able to take participants from all across Nunatsiavut and Nunatsiavut beneficiaries living in Canada to take online lessons, where they'll be able to teach the basics or intermediate levels. So for that, we don't really need the exact space, but the exact space will come later for sure.
Kimberly, congratulations to you, your team, and the other two groups that are awarded these inspiration prizes. Nice to have you on the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Take good care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Nakamik.
That's Kimberly Pilgrim. She's one of the group that has been awarded $1 million to establish this cultural centre in Hopedale. All right, good show today. Big thanks to everyone who supports the programme, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer David Williams, I'm your host Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you want to get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.